So, Sylvia, let's just start with you running for city council. How was that? What were you trying to accomplish?
Well, I decided to give back to my community. And I noticed that people that were connected with the city officials got preferential treatment. And regular people like me, we could wait forever. So I decided I would get involved and help the other residents and myself to make things fair and to get people to respond to our requests.
How did you feel when you won?
I was elated. I was so happy.
Preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution and laws
the Constitution and laws
of the United States
of the United States
and of this state, so help me God.
and of this state, so help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I really wanted to get involved and make some changes and help people. Like, I gave them my number. If they had a problem, they could call me direct, and I would get a hold of the city manager or the other departments within the city.
So, tell us a bit about the petition that you put together.
Okay.
What was the petition for?
The petition was set up to fix our streets, and a lot of people wanted the previous city manager, Diane File, to be the city manager again because she was responsive, she was smart, she did contracts, she did everything very well, and people were pleased with her.
So, how did you present that petition to the rest of the city council once you were on the council?
I had supporters that helped me, and they turned it in for me while I was sitting on city council. It was a negative situation from the start. And I only had 1 week before my first meeting, and that's when I circulated the petition. And on my first meeting, it was very hostile. People were allowed to stand up and yell out stuff. And the only thing I did say is to keep some kind of order. They could speak with me after the meeting if they had a problem with me, but there are some people that wanted to know about city business because people can also see the city council meeting on the internet as it's happening. So that was pretty much what happened at the first meeting. And because of all of this, I got to ask a few questions for the city manager, and they were just so upset with me.
And then it just escalates.
Yes.
Way from there. So what ended up happening?
The second meeting that we had, we voted on removing the city manager. And the city attorney pulled us into an executive meeting, said we could not do that, etc., that they were going to be sued and all this other stuff, even though everyone had qualified immunity. But, we were just trying to do our job, and we were the majority.
So what ended up happening to you? What did the city end up doing to you?
Well, first off, they removed me from city council. They said that the Bexar County sheriff was not qualified to swear me in. However, the previous Bexar County sheriff, Susan Parmelo, swore in 2 people, and they handled their, city council for 2 years without a problem.
So they kind of make up this reason to
Yes,
remove you. They
but
also make up reasons to do other stuff to you.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
They make it up as they go along.
Yeah.
I think what happened is they had meetings and they made plans because one of the city council people wrote an article in the newsletter on how to remove a city council member. And they used that as a blueprint on everything they did to me. And they worked in unison. Like, I guess they had meetings on
They all kind of conspired
yes,
against
they conspired, and they say, you do this, you do that. So I had 6 people that filed a lawsuit against me demanding that I step down from city council and that I have a judge and jury trial on my horrible criminal case.
So yeah, we're burying the lead a little bit here.
Yes,
so
we are.
you eventually get arrested for this, and,
Yes,
and you
I
get
got
charged and whatnot.
Out of the blue, I got a phone call that there was a warrant out for my arrest. Actually, my husband took me to the jail and I turned myself in. And there was a lot of stuff that happened in the jail.
Like what? What happened in jail?
Well, first off, I got my mug shot. And then they told me, I noticed there was a box and there was like an x-ray machine or something. And they told me if I had any guns or drugs in the orifices of my body. And I told them, no, I don't have any of that. I'll just, go on. And they said, listen, if you don't get in that box, we're going to forcibly strip search you. I said, I'll get in the box.
Jeez, that's terrifying.
Yes. And I mean, it was cold and there was a lot of bad people in there, drug addicts, prostitutes.
Usually it's criminals that they send to jail, not,
One girl
ladies
had
with
two
petitions.
black eyes. I guess they must have had a fight or something.
Oh, goodness.
Well, she said her boyfriend beat her up and threw her out of the car. I mean, there was a lot of people in there.
Yeah.
Anyway, and they put the handcuffs on so tight. It was hurting my circulation, and I asked her one of the girls to please loosen them, and she tightened them. It was, just not a good place, and you have no rights. And it's a horrible awakening to know, what it's like. I had never been in jail. I had a clean record. Didn't even have a parking ticket, nothing. So Chicken Little went to jail.
And, it's completely baseless charges, right? They dropped the charges against you and...
Well, the district attorney said I did nothing criminal. So they refused the case. And then I think they went to a judge and got him to sign. And then it went back to the district attorney's office. And when they saw that the district attorney said I did nothing criminal, they were not going to prosecute, then they said that I forged all the names on the petition. And they sent a police officer out to intimidate the people that signed. And they were scared to death. They thought, oh, my God, they're here to arrest me. I'm going to jail like Sylvia.
Just for signing a petition.
Right.
So, Patrick, this sounds incredibly insane and unusual, but this isn't the, only situation like this. What is this problem going on?
Yeah, so Sylvia's case, I think, is a perfect illustration of something that we're seeing all across the country and that happens quite a bit. And it takes the form of small town governments becoming little fiefdoms of petty tyrants across the country. And in Sylvia's case, she had, spoken through her constituents to remove the city manager who wasn't doing a good job. And all that she did at the end of the day was champion this non-binding expressive document, which was a petition saying why the members of the city didn't like the city manager. And because the city manager was essentially doing the work of the group that had been running the city for years. And Sylvia replaced an incumbent who had a strong relationship with the mayor, who had a strong relationship with others on city council and the police chief, and they had selected the city manager who would then in turn do what they wanted. And so this petition actually was Sylvia and many members of the constituency in very small Castle Hills, Texas, standing up to the powers that be, and they didn't like that, and it was not going to stand. And so, like Sylvia said, they concocted this multi-pronged plan that was eventually published in the city newsletter, which said, hey, by the way, one of the ways you can remove someone from city council is if you get them convicted of a crime. And so all of this then became a way to punish Sylvia and remove her from the city council. And so what actually happened that day, the continued meeting, was for some reason this petition that, again, Sylvia had championed and had her supporters turned in, had not been checked into the city clerk. It had been in the custody of the mayor. And Sylvia sat next to the mayor on the dais of the city council table. And this petition wound up in Sylvia's binder. There's no indication whatsoever there was anything other than an innocent mistake at this point. And while Sylvia was off talking to actually Amy McClin, the woman who she'd beaten in the race, the mayor came racing up to the podium, kind of peeks around, sees that the petition is in Sylvia's binder, waves over police, has the police go get Sylvia, brings Sylvia up, says, "Where's the binder?" or says, "Where's the petition?" They have this whole exchange. Sylvia gives the petition back. The petition's never left city council's table at all. Sylvia's never left the room. And basically nothing comes of this from Sylvia's perspective for a couple months. But what we've learned now, before she ended up finding out that there was a warrant for her arrest, is the mayor and police chief set a police officer to investigate this incident. And he came back after looking into it and said, "I don't think any crime's been committed." That was not satisfactory because, again, we're talking about the steps to remove Sylvia and punish her for what she did. So they brought in a local attorney, which they dubbed a special detective, and told him essentially, "You can find a crime for the situation." And after more than a month of investigating, what he came up with was that when Sylvia had temporarily had the petition in her binder, what she was doing was a violation of a Texas statute that makes it a crime to tamper with a government document. And so ultimately, that was the charge. And on top of that charge, they went outside of the normal process because this is a minor misdemeanor, even if you commit the crime. And what they did was, instead of putting it through that way, which would have allowed Sylvia to be given a summons and never had to go to jail, they walked this directly to a judge without the district attorney's involvement. They went around the district attorney and they got an arrest warrant, which is why Sylvia had to spend time in jail for this. It's why she got a mugshot, and everything else flowed from that. And so Sylvia's case is an egregious violation of the First Amendment. We all have a right to speak. We all have a right to criticize the government. We all have a right to petition our government. These are words in the First Amendment of our Constitution. And so then, of course, we think, well, I couldn't possibly get arrested for doing these things. But what Sylvia's case shows is that you can, in fact, get arrested. And the question is just whether you can do anything about it. And the problem is, and one of the reasons we're seeing this happen across the country, is that a few years ago, the U.S. Supreme Court said, if there's probable cause to arrest you for a crime, it doesn't matter if that arrest was actually motivated by your protected speech, outside of a very limited exception called the jaywalking exception. And so the default position is, even if a city couldn't pass an ordinance saying that Sylvia couldn't have petitioned or that Sylvia can't say bad things about the city manager, they could just as easily arrest her for doing those things under some pretextual crime, like tampering with a government document or knocking pecans out of a tree. And then they're able to work around this. There's no mechanism to hold them accountable. They can assert qualified immunity. And the upshot of all this is that you have the Constitution being violated. You have someone whose rights have been violated, and often there's nothing they can do about it.
It's so obviously, this whole situation, just a trumped up thing for purely retaliatory reasons, right? And it sounds like what you're saying is that courts can go, yeah, that sounds like what's happening, but it doesn't matter. People are basically allowed to do that, right? And so Sylvia's case is now going to the Supreme Court. What exactly are we asking the Supreme Court to change?
Yeah, and so there's a couple things to unpack here. The first is this concept of qualified immunity, which is something that any government official at any level doing any sort of potential constitutional violation gets to assert. And that is a two-part test. Part one is, was there a constitutional violation? And part two is, whether it was clearly established by an earlier case using basically the same facts. And the reason that's relevant in Sylvia's case is because if a government official is denied this immunity at the earliest stage in a lawsuit, they can immediately appeal. And so that's what happened here. The lower court, the trial court here, they denied these officials qualified immunity. And so then they were able to immediately appeal. And the issue that will come before the Supreme Court then is actually under this first prong, which is a constitutional violation prong, because of the case law that I mentioned earlier that says if there's probable cause for your arrest, you simply can't even assert a First Amendment claim. The question that we're asking the court is, what kind of exception should apply to that rule such that someone like Sylvia can't be arrested for speaking? When the court announced that rule, what it was concerned about was police making on-the-spot arrests in dangerous situations. And what the court thought was, well, anybody can say that they were arrested for retaliatory reasons. What we don't want is police officers making these difficult decisions to have that in the back of their mind and maybe not arrest someone dangerous because they're worried about a lawsuit. But what Sylvia's case illustrates is the rule that the Supreme Court came up with has allowed all sorts of constitutional abuse to take place across the United States. And so far from the imagined criminal in a case where the court wants to protect the police, you have people like Sylvia, who is a nice city councilwoman who's never committed a crime in her life and who's clearly the victim with overwhelming evidence of retaliation by the concerted effort of a group of people who are in charge of a city, not some police officer who thinks he sees something and may be wrong about it after the fact.
Yeah, there's nothing that's, a split second in the moment decision here. You said it took months before.
2 months, yes.
Yeah, so clearly this is a premeditated.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you ever imagine before all of this happened, did you ever imagine that you would be at the center of a Supreme Court case?
No. It was, in this date and time in our country, how can someone like me who follows the law be arrested and so mistreated for wanting to help the citizens of a city, for wanting to work? We don't get paid on city council. I had the time and the interest to get involved.
How do you feel about being involved in the city now? I mean, they've, come after you,
Well, it's kind of scary because they make things up. And they have people that will lie and do stuff to you. And you don't know where it's coming from, and you can't protect yourself of a lie. And then there's so much publicity that people that know me know it wasn't true, but people that don't know me think that I'm a criminal, I'm a horrible person. I tried to steal a document, government document, or alter it in some way. So it's a very horrible feeling, and I just wouldn't want to get involved with these bad people again.
So what was it like when you got in touch with IJ?
Oh, I felt I was in a very dark place. I felt that people were unkind and said things to me because I was a criminal, and everyone was believing that because I got so much publicity. My mugshot was on the front page of the newspaper. The television stations kept, talking about it. The mayor kept calling reporters in and going over this. And people from other places were being informed about my criminal case and what I had done that was so wrong. And I decided I didn't want to be involved with these kind of people. It left a big impact on my life. And my daughter is a deputy sheriff, so you could say I was arrested at her office because that's where the booking is and the jail is. And people would come in and say, "See her, there she is. That's Elizabeth's mother." Oh, wow. Yeah, and then my husband, he was so upset over the whole situation that I was under. He actually got sick. So I was being hit from all sides.
Right.
So I decided not to get involved again. To try to shield myself.
Right. So when you got the call from IJ, people are saying, "Hey, we'll do your case for free." That kind of seems like a scam initially, right? How did you react to that?
Well, I was very surprised and I felt elated that I could say my side of the story and someone would listen and help me. If it wasn't for IJ, I would not be going to the Supreme Court because I would not have that amount of money in my 401k to continue paying attorneys. And I spent quite a bit of money, and I didn't get anything in return.
So IJ comes in, we have this Supreme Court case. So Patrick, what happens after Sylvia's case? How does it affect other people that have experienced this kind of thing?
Yeah. So let me first say that, we met Sylvia about, 4 years ago now?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yep. And we, this is a case that IJ filed in the first instance. We've been fighting this thing from the trial court through the Court of Appeals and now up through the U.S. Supreme Court on this important issue of essentially whether you have a First Amendment right to accountability if what the government did to you isn't, fire you or prohibit you from doing something because of your speech, but instead arresting you for it. And so what makes Sylvia's case so important in a legal sense is that what we're hoping to accomplish here is to restore the most important First Amendment rights that most Americans have from the most egregious type of violation that the government can do, which is being able to speak, being able to petition, being able to associate on the one hand, and what the government responds with is throwing you in jail if you do it. And so obviously, as Sylvia's case illustrates, if the government can do that, they effectively can shut you up. And so they can censor you, not by telling you can't say this thing or you can't turn in this petition, but saying, go ahead, do it. We'll jail you if you do. And everyone else will see that. And so, when we first heard about Sylvia's story, one of the first things, of course, you do is you get online, you Google it. And like she said, the first thing that comes up is a picture of her in an orange jumpsuit. And, in this space of immunities and accountability, you have people who have already had something bad happen to them. And many of them have been arrested or they've been to jail because of something unconstitutional. And the position that they find themselves in is, like Sylvia said, most of their friends and neighbors just assume, well, if you didn't do something bad, you wouldn't have gotten arrested. You must have been doing something bad. And they control this whole narrative for months or years or forever if there's no way to hold them accountable in the end. And so, when we see a situation like this and we get to come in and represent someone so wonderful like Sylvia, we get to tell her story. And the reason that I'm filling this in here isn't just to tell you how wonderful Sylvia is, which she is, but is to highlight how important it is that Sylvia's case is the one that's going to the U.S. Supreme Court.
So what happens next? So we're kind of poised to, through this uniquely, cut and dry story really of it's clearly a completely innocent and protected thing that you were doing. It's such extreme facts here. The precedent that could potentially set, how does that affect other people?
So the precedent that we are hoping to set here is that the government can't come up with a pretextual crime to apply to someone because of the speech that person has expressed and because the government doesn't like that speech. And so the importance that we're hoping will come out of Sylvia's case is that will take away an enormously dangerous tool from the people that I called petty tyrants earlier. If we win Sylvia's case, that will take a large tool out of the tool chest that is allowing them to do things to do things like this to people like Sylvia, to people like our client Noah Peterson in Iowa, to people like our client William Fambro in East Cleveland, to people like our client Waylon Bailey in Alexandria, Louisiana. And so it is more important now than it's ever been. And Sylvia's case, so hot on the heels of the last Supreme Court case that created this bad law, stands a chance of fixing this thing and stopping it from metastasizing over the next decade or two or three.
So you just listed a whole bunch of IJ cases that are part of our project on immunity and accountability that deals with retaliation, but it also deals with, some other issues kind of in a similar space. So how does Sylvia's case and these other retaliation cases, how does that fit into the project more broadly?
Yes, so the project is focused on, generally speaking, immunities. And so we think of things like qualified immunity, which is an issue in play in Sylvia's case. It's not the issue that the Supreme Court will decide. But what we've realized after 4 years after launching this project is there are many things that aren't called immunities that are effectively immunities. And so the way that these retaliation these retaliatory arrest cases fit in is that, like I said earlier, the court here has carved out an exception to the First Amendment effectively that says, as long as the government violates your rights by arresting you, there's nothing you can do about it. And so the retaliatory arrest cases are aimed at getting rid of a new species of immunity that the Supreme Court created for First Amendment retaliatory arrests. And, we think that, of course, is very important for the reasons I said earlier, which is that we're talking about some of the most important constitutional rights we have and some of the most egregious ways that the government can violate those.
What is the project trying to accomplish writ large?
So generally speaking, what the project is trying to do is something that seems so simple that you almost can't believe it's something that needs to be done, which is allow people whose rights have been violated to go to court and get a remedy for these constitutional violations. But unfortunately, because of things like this retaliatory arrest rule or qualified immunity or judicial immunity, the courts have built up all of these exceptions. And the exceptions mean that even if your constitutional rights have been violated by a government official, there's nothing you can do about it, which means there's no way to hold that official accountable. And there's no way for you to have a remedy. And if you have a right without a remedy, the question becomes, what good is that right? And the purpose of our Project on Immunity and Accountability is to ensure that every right has a remedy under our Constitution.
So, Sylvia, I want to direct the last question here to you. Is there anything that you want to say to the folks who support IJ, make IJ possible? Is there, anything that you want to share?
Well, the people that support IJ, I'm very grateful to them because they have no idea what it means to a person like me who felt there was nothing that I could do in retaliation to these people that are evil in the city. I mean, everyone has to agree. How can you run a city and everyone agrees? You need to, I think, have differences of opinion. I never learned anything from people that agree with me, but I have learned a lot from people that disagree with me. And I keep an open mind. Just maybe they're right, and just maybe I'm wrong. They can convince me of that, and I can change my views.
So when we go to the Supreme Court in a couple of months, what's it going to be like for you to sit in that room and to see Anya, the attorney, argue your case? How's that going to feel?
I'm going to feel that there is hope at the end of the tunnel. And Anya and Patrick are amazing. I'm so grateful to IJ and their supporters. I feel like I was so lucky to meet IJ. I feel I was in a dark place. It was so humiliating. And all of the people in the news media had a heyday with just one side of the story. And a lot of times, like my husband says, you can't undo what's done, but you can still try to rectify it. And that's what I want to do. And I'm grateful that I get to go to the Supreme Court. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. I never dreamed that this would happen.
Well, you say that you're lucky to have IJ, but we're lucky to have you. And I'm just so grateful to you for standing up for this and fighting back, not just for yourself, but for everybody else so that they can speak up and not be afraid of their government.
Well, it's very easy to throw in the towel, and say, oh, no, I don't want to move forward. I don't want any more trouble. I still live in that city, that little city. I still have to live there. And I still have to deal with issues and problems with the city and the police. I mean, you don't never know what they're going to do next.
After your case is over, would you ever run for city council or anything like that again, or are you done with it?
I feel no, I don't think I would ever do that again. And my husband and my daughter agree with me. I mean, they pretty much read me the riot act.
Thank you so much, Sylvia, and thank you, Patrick.